Hello and welcome to the Divinely Sovereign podcast. I'm your host, Senna Scott. I am a sovereignty empowerment coach and intuitive artist. The Divinely Sovereign podcast is a spiritual growth podcast and sanctuary for women becoming their most creative, expressive, and sovereign self. This is for the woman who is done pushing, proving, and performing, and ready to live from self-trust, embodiment, inner authority, and divine alignment. If you are in a season of becoming, this space is for you. So I am so deeply excited for this juicy conversation that I'm going to have with Jody Bauer. Jody Bauer is a high conflict divorce coach. She combines a Master of Science from Seattle Pacific University and 27 plus years as a nurse practitioner with expertise in navigating the complexity of family court up against an antagonistic personality. With a strong understanding of trauma, predictable patterns of abuse, and strategies to deal with such personalities in a legal setting, she strives to help clients find their voice, recover their agency, and come out the other side of a divorce ready to start a new life for themselves. So, without further ado, I welcome you to Jody Bauer. Hi, Jody.
Hi, Senna.
How are you doing today?
I am just very excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we met up a couple weeks ago and we talked about like this podcast and was alive. And we had met in January, so a couple months ago at a potluck.
Obviously.
Yeah, and I
Mhm.
remember we just had some juicy conversations around the things that we've navigated ourselves through religious programming, upbringing, as well as separation in marriage or partners
Oof.
of our children and that we've had with our children. And uh, yeah, and navigating narcissistic abuse. And I like what you say, antagonistic partners.
Mhm, mhm.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then you came and told a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that was so
Yeah,
great.
so yeah, you host That's What She Said, which is such a freaking powerful event of
Mhm.
women coming together and sharing their stories, spoken word, whatever's alive for them, or even in the moment, just kind of swinging it.
Mhm. Yep, so good. So good. Thanks for doing that.
So, Jody, you have such a unique combination of experience. Decades as a nurse practitioner and now working as a high conflict divorce coach. What led you into this work of helping people navigate divorce and abusive dynamics?
Good question. I actually think that this was a sort of natural segue into this work. A lot of people are like, "How did you go from being a nurse practitioner to being a divorce doula?" Like, they're very different, and I can see on the face that they are, right? But, um, I think at the heart of it is, the same, uh, drive for me, which is, I don't know, there was a quote by somebody, I don't know who it was, that said, like, as women, maybe as humans, we work to be the protector that a younger version of ourselves needed, right? And
Mm.
so I think in my work in medicine and in the work I'm doing here, I think just I'm just doing that, right? I want people to feel normal. I never felt normal growing up. I felt like I was in the outside of things, and we'll talk about that a little bit later with the religious component. Um, but and actually, I was just listening to Judy Bloom talk about her writing process, and she had a similar, like, her books. Are You There, God? They were all about, like, is it okay? Like, can we ask questions about, are we going to get periods? Like, does everybody feel this way? All those things. I think that's at the heart of both of the types of work that I've done. And at its essence, I'm sitting in front of someone and I'm making space for them to tell me their story, like whether it's their story of shitting their pants at Hagen or it's their story of navigating this relationship that they're trying to make sense of. We all like crave that space to just have a moment out of the busyness to articulate our story, which often we don't do in the higher part of our brain, right? It just rumbles down here somewhere. give us a chance to articulate that story and then be with somebody who like pays attention to that and believes you and then works with you to find solutions in that. So I think my drive is just to take care of myself, 15, 30 years ago, going through all of this to try to make it better. Like, I just want to make it better. So, and of course, this is a very niche work, right? I sort of consider myself a divorce doula, but my specialty and my heart really is when I'm working with someone that has gone through abuse in general, and specifically these covert behind the scenes kind of abuse that is just, it's crazy making. And so having gone through my own experience years ago, I I just kept thinking like, man, I really wish somebody would have been able to put some words to what I was going through. And it wasn't for years into the process before somebody had a name for this. And for me, maybe my science driven name, if something has a name, if other people have gone through it, if the data supports it and there are, actionable solutions, it's soothing to me. I'm like, oh, okay. Because again, then I am normal. I'm not crazy. I'm not imagining that this preposterous, like, is my life really this kind of terrible movie situations, right? Like I can, it is normal. And I don't know. So that's why I moved into this. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's beautiful. I remember at the speaking event that you hosted, one of the most powerful themes that we kind of had a talk at the end
Hmm.
was just that power of like another person seeing you
Hmm.
and like feeling so seen that what you're saying is like there's language around it. There's someone validating your story of
Hmm.
like, yeah, this is not okay.
Yeah, that's
There
right.
is another reality available for you.
That's right.
Come
Yeah.
walk with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. The
Yeah.
witnessing is so meaningful. And, even in medicine, I have experienced this many times, even as a provider, and I'm sure your listeners have as well, where you can tell that your provider is in a hurry or they're disinterested or you're boring them or they don't believe you. And all of that can be communicated, right, in the way that they are either like present with you or not, whether they're always, if it's just on their computer and they're following their list of questions, not really attending to you. Like we've all experienced that. And I think it particularly when someone's reality has been distorted for so long and there is so much confusion around what is even happening, what is true, that yeah, that witness to someone's story I think is really important, whether it's funny or heartbreaking. I think we all like long to be witnessed and believed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So you also have personal experience navigating divorce and custody with a covert narcissist. Would you be open to sharing a bit about that experience and how it shaped the work you do today?
I would, yes, I would. This is a recent development for me um to feel like I could share this stuff out loud. Um, Anne Lamott says something like, "If people wanted you to speak warmly of them, they should have behaved better in the first place." And I love that so much. This idea that your story belongs to you. What happened to you belongs to you.
Yep.
And I think I had, in years past, I would have framed something as, well, people are going to think I just, want people to think ill of him, or I'm just trying to put him down. And there's plenty of actions that I don't really need. I don't really even need to be saying anything for that to be true. But the fact that this story belongs to me, and I do think, and we'll probably touch on this later, this is a societal and a religious component of silencing women, right, and creating these really complex and frightening consequences when they don't. And when that happens collectively as a society, people are smart, and you eventually stop doing the thing that keeps hurting you because otherwise you would get destroyed, right? We stop touching a hot fire because you're like, yeah, don't do that again. That was really painful, right? And
Mhm.
so it is new for me to start speaking about this. The first time I recorded this, even anonymously a few years ago, I spent a month afterwards just going in and out of panic attacks. And my newfound therapy is to go into the bay, and just be cold and terrified and breathe and I can only be present with, why am I doing this? Am I going to die? All that kind of those kind of feelings. And it would soothe me. Right. And the exposure of that, knowing that I was, even anonymously, that I was saying these things out loud, it terrified me. And it went against all of the rules that unspoken sort of rules that I had, kind of unknowingly signed on to in my marriage. And really, I would say from the religious programming, you don't speak ill of anyone. You don't talk bad about anyone. You always want to see the best in somebody else, right? And and so there's so many factors, right, that lead into that. But my own story, I would say, was a marriage that was confusing. That's the primary word, and I listen to that when people are talking to me about relationships. It's confusing. I don't know. Like I described it usually just in my head. Myself and I had conversations about how it felt like I was on, like, quicksand or shifting sand. Like I never quite felt like I knew what was up and what was down. And there were a lot of lies and half truths, but told by a very skilled con man, really, that knew how to give me just enough truth in the story to make it believable, and put enough, I don't know, something around it to cause me to resist questioning it, I guess you would say. And so it was confusing. It was chaotic. I felt like there was this potential kind of whirling dervish that would come home, and sometimes it would be very exciting, like, "Oh my God, we're going to Hawaii tomorrow. Like, pack your bags." "Oh my God, okay, okay." Or, "Oh my gosh, this thing's just happening." Sometimes very exciting, sometimes like terrifying, sometimes really scary energy coming into the house that I would have to, like, "Oh, okay, okay, this is what we're doing, right? Blah, blah, blah." And I was his helpmate, and I was his soother, and I was his teacher, and I was his mother, and I was his therapist, and I was his all these things, right? And I would I would instantly put aside anything else I was doing to attend to him. And I did this really without realizing. And looking back, I can see I didn't really have an option. That was what was insisted upon, right? Um, so I would say chaos, and then eventually I began to feel, before I could say I knew it, I would feel like I was getting a different version of him than other people did.
Yeah.
And I think it was most notable for me watching him coach. He coached our boys in lacrosse, and he was an incredible coach. Objectively, I would say I have a few things that I will say to be true about him, and this is one of them. He was a great coach. He was kind and patient and funny with these kids, and I could tell they could relax around him. Um, and he like brought them up to a higher level, and he was a great coach. And that is what most of the community saw. When I met him, he was also working with high school kids, and I fell in love with him for the way that he attended to these kids, because I knew I wanted to be a mom, and I knew I wanted to pick somebody who really prioritized children, and his delight in them, and his just patience to spend time with them and do what they wanted to do. It was so beautiful to me, and I think that was the hugest part that I fell in love with him. So then over the years, I'm watching him be this person in public, and I'm seeing all of these influential people in the community reflect that back, like, "Oh, he's such a great coach. I'm so glad my kid, blah, 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 blah." But at the same time, these experiences were happening at home when no one was watching, that were very, very different. So I watched him lie to our kids sometimes, gaslight them. I never said that. I never said I was going to go do that. And I didn't, I swear to you, I didn't even recognize it until we were towards the end and I was starting to become aware of some of these patterns. I, I took the onus on myself. I must have misheard that. I must have, been my memory's so bad. This is a classic one. If you hear people using this can be a sign. Oh, I don't trust my memory. Like I'm always forgetting things.
Mm.
And there's scientific reasons for that, right? The way our brain protects us in traumatic situations, it just hides that memory so we don't have to, deal with it. But I watched him be very harsh with our children, be very sometimes, not all the time. He definitely favored one child over the others. To this day, that's the case. It's just a known phenomenon in our family. He would manipulate them. He would demand their attention and follow through on a dime. And I modeled that. I can see to them, right? He demanded that of me. I did it. He demanded it of them. They would jump up how high. They were afraid of what would happen if they didn't follow through, right? And so these two kind of realities are building. And I also felt like I had two different parts of me. I had this part of me that was respected in our community as a healthcare provider. And I I am blessed to have had so many patients be like, "Oh my God, can you please just be my doctor? Like, this was the best visit. Like, I feel like you really heard me." And I was getting this feedback, right? About like, you are doing good work. You know what you're doing, right? This is what you're doing really matters. And I started a business on my own. That's a different story. But so outside my house, I was this kind of sassy, strong, driven person, right? And that was a reality of me. And if I was just home with my kids, or even better, if I was not home with my kids, I was kind of that same version of Jody. When he was home or when I knew he was coming home, it was like I mean, I'm doing this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it makes me teary.
Yeah.
I I think I could actually feel myself like settling into a smaller, more compliant version of me.
Yeah.
Dulled, I think is the word. And I I would switch back and forth between those. So I actually haven't ever thought about this the way that he sort of had these two different ways of being. I also developed these two ways of being, right? Where I could slip into this, keep the peace, compliance, smooth over all the cracks. Like I was sort of his reputation manager. So I would hear something shady that had happened business wise, and I would make it make sense for me, maybe to my friends. Some of the stuff that was happening that was visible to other people, to my closer friends, they would see that and go, I would make that make sense, right? And so this idea of cognitive dissonance, meaning this inability of our brain to hold two separate varying truths, and it can't do that, so it chooses one, and it's going to choose the safer option. And much of that is done subconsciously. It's not a very like higher brain, which one of these realities am I going to sit with right now? It doesn't do that. Our brains are so um evolutionary, and they're so focused on survival and safety that those decisions happen largely without our permission, right? So I am realizing that I have become these different versions of myself, and I don't like it. And I am becoming aware of how I am falling into a role that I was determined not to follow as I came through study in university, and this new way of thinking. Like I grew up witnessing a fairly controlled but fun household. Um, very, very religious, very controlled, very um to say focused on the outside view of us. What do we look like? And I didn't recognize that immediately because we were quite poor. We never had nice cars. We had a house that was fine. We had a farm. Like I was raised on a farm, and I didn't ever anticipate having an identity around like needing to keep up with the Joneses, essentially, um, in terms of material things. But I have later become aware of this. I guess it would be a focus or a push toward a public appearance and a way of being that reflected my parents in a way that sits well with them and that reflects back on who they are as Christians, who they want to be viewed as Christians. And we were reflections of that. And so to step outside that was to cause harm to our parents. Even recording this and the work I'm doing on my book, it's always in my mind, right? I don't really want to hurt my parents. I know that they did the very best with what they had. They tried so hard to do what they thought was right. And I genuinely believe that. And I don't have any desire to hurt them, right? And at this age, I don't think it benefits anything. And so I'm always aware of, is this something I'm going to share with them? Because I I think to question that the way that I was raised is to have an entire system crumble for them and an entire lifetime, a commitment of holding to this way of performing in the world, which that's language they would never use, but it really is sort of a performance, right? Are my kids going to church? Are they reading their Bible? Are they meeting regularly with other Christians, right? Are they having quiet times? Are they are they doing all the things that signal to the world that this person is other, that they are separate, that they are chosen, that they are not like everybody else, right? And um, so I think that is, I'm not even sure if I'm answering your question, but um, I think that commitment to appearing a certain way, being a certain way, like pulled back into my marriage. And this inside the house version of Jody now was looking a lot like what I watched in my own house, where I was protecting the image of our family and protecting the image of my husband. And that was a lot of work. And particularly with as much shit as my husband would pull around town and with me, it became this, full-time job of managing that. And it started to feel really similar, where I am now the wife. I'm quiet. I don't speak up. I'm modeling to my kids. We do what dad says and we do it quickly and with a good attitude, that his voice is the priority in the home. And more than anything, I realized that I was modeling something that I swore I would never do, which is that I would talk about hard things with my kids and in our family, and that we would model repair, that my kids would get to witness my husband and I having hard conversations, being able to bring something to them, say, hey, it really hurt my feelings when you blah, 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 right? And have that other person be able to sit with it, own it, and go, oh, I'm so sorry. I totally missed you with that. And I'm going to really work, these steps of repair. I can see the impact. I take ownership of it, and this is how I'm going to do this differently. Right. And this is one of my biggest heartaches of having stayed in that marriage as long as I did, is that was continually modeled to my children. And what it looked like was something really awful would happen either to my children or to me. And the next day, my husband at the time would wake up happy, great, as if nothing ever happened, right? Which is a chapter in my book I'm working on. And your listeners may resonate with this pattern. This isn't a typical abuse pattern I now see, right? It is a form of shifting the reality to like, how can you be why are you so, like, you're really that sensitive that you're still hanging on to that? Like, oh my gosh, let's go have fun today. Let's have what's wrong, right? And And so that is what came in as a substitute for repair. It wouldn't be spoken about. And when I attempted to earlier on, it was met with such like disdain and rage and disruption to the day, honestly, that I eventually just stopped doing it. And his long absences in the evening, I of course I would have preferred to have a husband that stayed home and cared about things like being there for bedtime with the kids, reading books with them. At one point, I asked my husband to read a book with one of our 3 children when they were little because I was in the chaos of like dinner and dishes and bedtime and the chaos that is young children. And I asked him if he would read to one of our kids while I read, took her the other 2. And he like kind of sneered at me and was like, "Jody, you're the one who thinks reading's so important to the kids." And I remember thinking, "You're not wrong." I'm quite literal, right? You're right. I do think that reading is important to the children. And I was like, "Well, you're right." And so I took care of it then, right? And those moments, that was not an infrequent thing, right? To have this kind of shame thrown back on me, or um I think your listeners will resonate with the way that these personality types really, they study you. They study your reactions. They know which buttons to push that are going to really cause you to pull back and own something that doesn't belong to you. And I never imagined that there was somebody in my house studying my behavior so they could use it against me, but that's what was happening, right? And so he knew just what to poke on, like, "You're being selfish. You're not, like, how can you as a parent think this, blah, blah, blah," some other thing, or, kind of shaming with the community at mine, like, "People think you are blah, 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 blah," or "My friend so and so was said, he didn't even want to come by anymore because you're so judgmental," and he didn't feel welcome. And and what that leads to is taking you out of, for sure, the moment, right? And so now I'm not attending to one of my kids who's sad about something, or one of my kids who is, anything, not fully attending to that, because in my brain now I'm repaying that conversation. Really? I feel like the last time that guy came over, I was like, "Oh my God, it's so good to see you." And then I fed him breakfast. And but obviously that's how other people perceive me. And I know that I came from this really religious background. And so that must just be how people perceive me, is really judgmental. Um, and so then, like, I could spend hours ruminating out over, like, trying to make that make sense and find the truth in it. And the easiest pathway was to just own it. Like, it's easier to believe that it is something wrong with me that is fixable, or that I can work on even more, buy another book about, or spend more money in therapy to figure out about, than to accept the reality that there was someone in my household who was doing these things to me intentionally, who would cause me harm, make me feel shamed in order to get me to do what he wanted, or to leave him alone for him not participating in the things that I wanted him to participate in, right? Like, come to dinner when we're having dinner, help with dinner afterwards, do anything to participate with the children. Any of those kind of boring roles for women that I know my generation is, it's quite common. And I am hopeful about these younger generations of men who are recognizing the respect and the desire that shines through when you emulate to the person that you love, that you are with them,
Yeah.
and that this is not a gendered uh, situation. Parenting isn't gendered, right? Like, there's
Mhm.
no fucking babysitter, right? You
Yeah.
are their dad, you are their mom.
Yep.
And that idea actually really kind of caught me off guard toward the end of things, when I heard this idea, right? Like, don't don't say you're babysitting your kids, right? You are parenting, right? And that honestly
Yeah.
hadn't quite occurred to me, right? I know it makes
Yep.
everyone
Yep,
Their
no, this
liver
has
could.
happened to me before.
Yep. Yep. That's right. Yeah. So I don't know if that kind of paints a picture of like the marriage that I was
Yeah,
finding myself in, and kind of the sadness and having duplicated a lot of the patterns that I was raised in, kind of like against my intention, I would say.
yeah. I hear and am so witnessing you, and thank you so much for sharing your story. Like I know how much courage that takes to share,
Mm.
and I I appreciate, you know, I wanted to just give you full time to like really explore um reflecting, and also the kind of the tangents, and because they're not just tangents, they're all weaved together of
That's right.
all the ways that you've been conditioned, all those little subtleties in the dynamic, in the relationship, in your community, and how you were raised, and with the religion that was expected. You had certain expectations of you. And what I want to touch on here as well is like you really mentioned there was like two parts of you.
Hmm.
And something I learned today was that there's studies of like the greatest stress in the human body is when you are not being authentic
Uh-huh.
to yourself.
Yeah.
And so
That's a
like
good one.
I oh God, I really deeply resonate with so many parts of your story, and especially that because I remember like so many parts of my own journey where I felt like I was operating as two different people. This
Mm.
one for my friends and my corporate job, and trying to pursue this uh life that was expected of me and that
Mhm.
my dad wanted for me, and then also at the same time, like, being inside a extremely
Mm.
abusive relationship that
Mm.
was also covert, where,
Mhm.
um, on the outside, this guy looked awesome. His
Yeah.
friends loved him. His friends were great. They were genuine people. But
Yeah.
then, like, on the inside, it was always just these degrading, discrediting the thing about, like, knowing how to pick exactly the buttons,
Yeah.
like, full on studying everything about me and my psyche.
Yeah.
And there was this one night, if I may share, um, where, like, it was like this I was completely dissected my entire psyche.
Mm.
You get, like, completely dissected every single thing about me, and how it was just wrong, and
Mm.
how, like and it was the most shattering thing I've ever experienced in my life, of, like, literally not knowing who I was. And I went through this whole night where I grieved on the couch, and and he just went upstairs, went to bed. And in the morning,
Yeah.
at 3 in the morning, I left. I went back to my own house because I was staying at his house. And he's mad at me for leaving,
Yeah.
and for thinking that nothing happened at
Yeah.
all the night before. And that, like, how could I
Mm.
be upset about anything?
Mm.
And I just became this, like, hollow shell
Yeah.
of a person.
Yeah.
And what I ended up doing was I ended up completely mirroring him and his demeanor and his
Yeah.
poise, and reflecting back, like, just this neutral logic, unemotional, and it was in complete self-defense
Mhm.
of, like, navigating this. And
Mhm.
also just having no idea what was happening,
Yeah.
having no idea at all the
Yeah.
kind of relationship was in. I didn't even know what a boundary was. I didn't
Yeah.
even know my own self-worth
Mm.
or any of that. And I'm so grateful for the past 10 years of the education and the people stepping into this line of work that you're doing, that are helping to identify, and as you mentioned, like, bring language to the situation, what's happening, so that people can identify what the fuck is actually happening,
Yeah.
and that it's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're so right. And what you mentioned about the confusion and the fog of it, that is, like I mentioned, it is a trauma response, right? And it's intentional. So I have strong opinions about our opinions about our current administration, right? And it is such a big global illustration of what happens when somebody tries to separate or divorce from a narcissist, right? So you have this guy who everyone knows now is a liar and a cheat and a raper and an abuser of children and does not care for anyone. Like he is the only priority, right? And he is facing this big exposure of the truth about what he has been involved with Epstein, right? And in the same way that my ex and my clients just start dropping bombs everywhere, fires for people to put out, he's literally doing that across the world with no concern for the lives that are at stake, that it's not taken into consideration. And, any theory about this being tactical or thought through or worth the risk, I don't believe is accurate. I believe it is, I am at risk of being exposed and I can't tolerate it. And so if everyone can frantically focus on and try to solve all the problems that I'm creating outside of me, then they won't be looking at me, right? And so I think the chaos and the fog and the confusion are part of the strategy. So when and I want to say this very clearly, when people say, why didn't you just leave? Why did she stay if it was so bad? Was it really that bad? Because if it was, she would have left. And I feel I get actually very fucking angry when I hear that.
Yeah.
Not just in my own self-defense, right? I have plenty of that language on in my head about my own practice, right? But when you are dulled and made small and the way you articulate things is questioned and the conclusions you come to is shamed, there is um no higher thought process around being able to strategize anything. It's like it's a luxury to be able to see patterns clearly and act upon them. And you cannot see that when you are in the soup.
Yeah.
You can see what's in front of you on that moment on a Wednesday morning in whatever is right there. And all of you is required to attend to that. And then the next thing it's Thursday. And now it's May. And now it's 5 years later, 20 years later, right? And by creating this urgency and the chaos and the questioning of you keeps you just enough off guard that you don't have the space for that clarity. And that's why the work that you're doing, talking about these things, the more times we can talk about this, the more people might be able to see themselves in this story.
Yeah.
And the one thing that clients tell me pretty much without fail I can expect in an intake somewhere is it's like they all are following the same playbook. And when you read a story about some of these behaviors, it is stunning. It's actually quite dysregulating to be like, how could that possibly be like just a slightly different version of exactly what I went through? This thing that I have imagined that no one else, like only the worst, producer could come up with a movie like this fucked up, right? But then to find out that other people are experiencing just slightly different versions of that, it's so validating. And I think it does help the fog clear a little bit to the point where you can now see like, oh, we're not repairing. I'm just being shamed for being sensitive or holding on to things or all these other words that we like to use for women, right? And and yeah, it keeps you off guard and it keeps you quiet. And it is not ever the person's fault that's staying in that. It is straight up survival. And these are decisions that are being made on a by second basis, by a minute basis, without our permission. What's safe in this moment? Am I going to stand up to this? Am I going to put my kids at risk? Am I going to cause a scene publicly and embarrass my children? Am I going to risk my life? Am I going to risk my potential, safety or reputation in the community by saying the thing now? Do I even have anything in me to stand up to that right now? And like you mentioned, this like dulled, hollow shell can't do very much, right? It
No.
can just kind of fly around like a dust bunny, right? At the whim of this energy in the room. And so again, to reiterate, please don't ever ask somebody why they stayed. Gender aside, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can assume that if somebody stayed in something awful, it's because they didn't feel they had another choice. And I think that's the case in other countries where we have people coming to the country, with the shirts on their back to risk a life here. You have to assume that they felt no other choice, right? And I don't think it's that, obviously it's a different intensity, but sometimes it is, it's people's physical lives that they are making decisions about. So it's
Yeah.
very complicated.
Yeah. Thank you for touching on all that. And I am so excited because I haven't met another person that totally has called this out, because I've totally said this before, where I was like, America is in an abusive relationship with a narcissist. And I'm like, how, after going through it, after seeing it, after understanding the playbook, as you say, like seeing the signs of it, it's like, my God. Yeah, the divisiveness, the manipulation, all of it, the fog. And I so resonate too with like any time when like I was getting close to being like, okay, like I'm oh my gosh, I may have a revelation, or I found a friend, or I
Mhm.
found a new group, or I learned something more about myself, or I went through some season of healing and I was gonna make the leap and I was gonna do it. Yes, some bomb went off in the relationship that the person did. And it was always this like constant state of like fight or flight. Like
Mhm.
I couldn't ever really find, I love what you said, the quicksand, the solid ground
Yeah.
fully. And oh yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, I what was the moment in which you realized it was time to leave? That was it you that initiated the divorce?
Yes and no. I it took a lot of things. I am nothing if not stubborn and determined and capable. And there is not a problem or puzzle out there that I would not be interested in trying to solve. And so I love to do that. And I'm very competitive. I have three brothers and I had to keep up with, these boys and I did so, to be honest. But this capacity, I think, within me um, was very strong. And instead of viewing these, uh, these things that we're building over time, these experiences, this evidence, instead of viewing it as reasons why I should leave, which I literally never did until the very end, I I viewed them as things that I needed to bear and consequences of a decision that I had made and what I just need to live with, what I would need to live with now because of a decision that I made to marry this guy. And I genuinely never crossed my mind that I should divorce this person.
Mm,
And that sounds very strange. And I wouldn't be in that space now, but from the way that I was raised with people being punished for being divorced, ostracized from our community, and I didn't know anyone. I didn't have a single person that I knew that I was close to that had been divorced, or a family member that I knew. And so it just literally wasn't an option. And, we talked about this, I know when we met, like the idolizing of suffering and losing yourself. Literally to lose yourself is the goal. And to empty yourself of anything that you might desire or what you might want, or, all these selfish things within us, to rid yourself of that is kind of like the ultimate goal, right? And so, fuck, I know.
I have so many
And
thoughts on this. Yeah.
yeah, right. And so it's so, from this position of clarity looking back, it makes so much sense. And why I would stick through all the shit that happened and that I went through. But it wasn't until like a year of multiple things happening where the reality would kind of like it would like crest, like, you could just see the dorsal fin of an orca, like just enough to be like, I think I saw a whale there. And then it's gone. And enough of those were happening in a shorter period of time when my kids were all in school. And so I had a little bit more time on my own, and I had a little bit more space around me to even have a conversation with myself that was a little more rational, right? And and so there's some big incidences that we don't need to get into, but I I basically approached him and said, this isn't working for me anymore. However, we need to find a different way to do this. This isn't working. And he came back the next day and said, when you said yesterday that you wanted a divorce, I've been thinking about that. And I think you're right. I think we need to do that. And I remember thinking, I did not say I wanted a divorce. And I mean, I kind of wish I would have, right? I wish that was part of my story where I would have said, I'm divorcing you. I will not tolerate this anymore. But I could never have said that. It would not have been safe for me to say. And I never would have said that. But I said, this isn't working. We need to talk about another way. And so he basically picked up on that and was like, that's it. Okay, we're divorcing. And that was after a few days of really going back and forth. So this all happened on my 20th anniversary, literally our 20th wedding anniversary. And 2 days before, we had made a plan to go like have a picnic, kind of reproducing this picnic we had in France on a vacation once. And then we were getting each other paddleboards and we were going to go out. And so like 3 days, like before it eventually all went down, he had come back to that and was like, let's do this. He bought me flowers, was like, to another 20 years. He never bought me flowers. And that was after saying, like, since you said I want a divorce, I think we need to do that. And so there's a lot of back and forth. And then finally another event happened that was another like very clear layer where I realized, no, there is no going back for me in this. This thing is happening and there's no going back for me. That is a line. And now I could feel like I had a line. And so we began this, this is so embarrassing to me, but this is what happened again with like the public relations job that I had. I came home a few days after all this had happened, and he was sitting in our living room of our home that was completely in remodel. I had, in an effort to sort of literally save my marriage, I had agreed to sell our gorgeous home that we had, buy this piece of shit fixer-upper. And because I thought if he was less stressed about money, then maybe that was the ticket. Like that was the reason that would soothe things and help us make this marriage work. And so we were in the middle of this house that had like, we had dumped a can of paint on the floor to make it look decent-ish. And he had gone through and just spray painted the entire house this one color of beige. And there were, exposed wires and it was not much going on, but it was where we were in the living room. And I came home and he was sitting with our children. So that's not typical of it's in and of itself, right? But he was sitting with them and he had all of his things packed in two big, like construction sized garbage bags, not the luggage that we have in our house that he could have used, but these like garbage bags. And he was very sad. And, I, without thinking, immediately took on the job of the spokesperson and the smoother over. And I had just been sobbing in a parking lot for 2 hours. And I came home to this and I immediately was like, well, so you guys, I want to let you know what's happening. And it was all on me. Sorry. It was all on me, right? When you guys don't get along and sometimes we need to have you be in a different room, because you just can't quite, Dad and I are having trouble with that right now. And so we're going to find some time to be apart, and I just made it all about this, mutual kind of thing, right? And what followed was another process that I could never have named, and I now know to call post-separation abuse. And this is a phenomena similar again to what we're seeing in the administration right now, whereas this threat of exposure to this reality that they have decided is true about themselves. And we'll touch on that in a minute, but there's this threat to that. And so abuse on all directions ramps up in this rabid last-ditch effort to control you, to control the narrative, to keep you where they want you, right? And so touching on that a little bit, I think it's important to talk about what is happening inside, as far as we understand it, right? What is happening in the psyche of someone who we would describe as like a malignant narcissist or a sociopath, or somebody who can so easily cause harm, thoughtlessly, carelessly cause harm to another person without it touching them, you know? And so my best understanding of this is this basis in shame somehow, and the development of a story about themselves that must be true at all costs. And so it might look like, I am a good mom, and I would never harm my children, and I prioritize my family, and I am a generous business person, and I am a great friend, and whatever it is that is at the core of your desires, right? I am financially independent, or I am wealthy. I have enough money to be generous with my friends, right? Whatever that thing, out of shame, you need to be so true. And we all have this to an extent, right? And so I think that's important to note.
Yeah.
I don't want all of you being like, oh my God, am I a narcissist? Because we all self-protect in some way, right? This is like an exaggerated, pathological, inflexible version of that, where this is the truth at all costs, and nothing else can enter that, or it all breaks apart and they will be destroyed, right? And so they will fight to the death to hold this reality true. And it makes for some straight up fuckery when you are either in relationship, but for sure when you are wanting to leave one of these relationships. And I often describe to my clients, like, it is like there is a raccoon in your shed and they are rabid, and you coming at them with something so pesky as the truth of something that they just said, or a way that they just responded, or harm that they just caused. That is like, you know, coming at them with guns blazing, right? That's how it's interpreted, is, and I think even maybe you have experienced this in your relationship, for you to say something as, yesterday, I asked you to do this and you didn't do it. And then you made me feel bad for even asking you, right? How dare you come at me? Don't you know everything that I do in this house? Like, I let you come and stay here for free, and I could fully, well, whatever it is, right? Just everything they have at you to stop you from following that path, basically. From, they want you to stay small, but it's self-protective, right? And so I think in the most generous view of this person, it's sort of like they're stunted at whatever age this clicked for them. And it can be a big traumatic event, or it can be something small, whatever it was that kind of moved itself from personality quirk to pathology, right? And so I think it's important to understand that what's happening, right, as a basis, that they will do whatever it takes to keep you quiet, to keep you compliant, and to keep you as a source of soothing for them. And this is a part that, it's so gross. Most of us hopefully don't operate out of this at all, right? But, like, every once in a while you hear about like a kid who wants to put a nail through like a creature and watch it wiggle and squirm, right? That they derive some pleasure in that, right? And hopefully that's a momentary blip in childhood and they move through that, right? When this becomes solidified as a personality trait and a protective defensive mechanism, it becomes a pattern of soothing. And so if that person is dysregulated, someone else has called them out on their bullshit, let's say, or is threatening to see who they really are, and they come in the house dysregulated, then you are now the person that is responsible for soothing them. And maddeningly, it is soothing for them to know that they have caused you distress, that they've taken you out of the moment, for them to see you anxious, crying, like whatever it is, taken out of your moment. That is soothing for them. They're like, oh, okay, I feel better. Thanks. Right. They would never articulate that. And that is very painful thing to wrap your brain around. One, that it even exists in our society, for sure. Number two, that you married this person and let them in your bed and your body and made babies with them and sacrificed every fucking thing for them, thinking that one more thing that you could do might be the thing that would like heal them or bring them back to you. And that betrayal it's really, really hard to sit with, right? But I do think it's important to understand the pathology behind it, because it creates a way to understand it, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. The only way that this makes sense, these behaviors of, wanting to destroy you, telling a narrative around the community about, what must be true about you, about, taking you to court for bullshit motions, for wiggling out of any possible thing in a parenting plan that isn't spelled out black and white, for shaming you for wanting to articulate anything detailed that they know full well that they want to wiggle out of. All of those behaviors that don't make any sense. If you don't believe or really understand this perspective on it, then the only other explanation is that you aren't worthy of it. There's something wrong with you, that you, in fact, are doing something to warrant that behavior. Because in normal life, that's how that goes, right? You do something hurtful to a friend and they come at you and they're angry. You're like, that makes sense. It makes sense that this person is so in my face and angry about this because I did a really shitty thing and I hurt them. That tracks, right? That makes sense. That's on me. But to say that's on me over and over and over again, that's how we end up being hollow and dull and a small, tiny version of ourselves. But it's the only thing that makes sense in light of this, unless we are going to believe that not only do these people walk the earth, but one of them has been living in your house with you. And the only other explanation is I am doing something. It's my tone. I picked the wrong time to bring up this conversation. I should have known that he was going to be stressed from work. I know that he's really busy. I should have waited until he'd had his coffee that I made for him, or until I made the breakfast that he really likes and did the dishes so he didn't have to be bothered with that. Like all of these ways that we could, at least for myself, and I hear this in a lot of my clients, there's something else that I could have done, and if I would have saved myself from all of this anger and destruction. But I chose not to. And so I deserve this somehow, right? So it takes a long time to wrap your brain around. I think that's what's happening. I don't think this is about me. And, most of us, particularly if we sort of burn empathetic, if you will, and our tendency is to want to own. We want to own up. We want to make people feel comfortable. We want them to know that we will own whatever's ours, right? That actually can be kind of pathological
Yeah.
and not in a way that you can see it, right? I don't know if that resonates with you.
No, I'm grateful you mentioned that because one of the things I was going to ask as well is, um, I'm familiar with like the empath, the unhealed empath, and
Hmm.
narcissistic paradigm, and I really resonate with that, being a part of my own story and the learning
Hmm.
and articulating the dynamics in which it happened.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate you too mentioning about talking about the pathology of this and understanding that there was times, there was likely trauma, there was likely, something where it stunted their growth.
Hmm.
Bringing some humanity in here too, because what I
Hmm.
do wanna name is I feel like the word narcissist is thrown around like crazy.
Absolutely.
Probably way too much.
Yeah.
Where, there can be situations where I personally prefer, like, narcissistic tendencies,
Hmm.
like, when there's a certain dynamic at stake and you're in the fire of it, like, there's that, and I feel like drawing the line here and talking about then there is the pathology
Yeah.
of, like, actually someone in this.
Yeah.
And so I want to name, kind of just bringing that to our listeners as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
That, like, I appreciate you bringing in the humanity behind it too, because, like, every person is a human, and they're living and walking a path. And I personally, one of the things that's helped me the most is recognizing that, like, every single person in my life is a teacher. Some of these people are the most challenging fucking teachers I have ever experienced,
Yeah.
but they were the actors for
Mm.
me to be able to reclaim my power.
That's right.
And you touched on one more thing, several minutes ago, but you mentioned something about the religious programming aspect, how people were taught that it's about self-sacrificing. I
Mhm.
personally have a belief that the Christianity that we have today that's mainstream is I mean, if you just look from an objective perspective and you know the history of it, like, quite literally, it is for men. It is written by men. It is articulated by men. It has been quite literally 425 after Christ's death, like, texts and gospels and stories of women that were ministers, women
Mm.
that had empowering stories were taken out from the Bible.
That's
There
right.
is quite literal inscriptions in there that um, have shifted things so that the narrative is very oppressive for women. She's a whore or she's holy, but she
That's right.
can't have sex.
No.
So what I want to name here is that, like, the path, even though it's beautiful, of, like, the idea of self-sacrificing, I believe that is a masculine path.
Mm.
Women, I have this
Mm.
one. This is my theory. This is my perspective.
Oh,
I
you're for
believe
it.
that
You're for it.
men, they're already ego. They're already boundaried. They're already of the earth. And one of the things that they need to learn is to be self-sacrificial, to
Mhm.
come into the heart, to understand there's a greater, like
Mhm.
world out there. And some of that's the most beautiful, poetry there is. But I think that religious programming is the most detrimental thing for a woman, because we are the opposite. We are descension. Our journey is actually to come into ourselves. Our
Mhm.
journey is to actually love our ego, to own it, to have boundaries, to be
Got
in our,
space. Yeah.
yeah, take up our space,
Mhm.
to, like, actually
Yeah.
become our sovereign being.
Yeah.
And a part of that is, like, us having a connection and being resourced with earth and
Mhm.
God, and, yeah, having these fucking boundaries.
Mhm.
And owning our sexual power,
Yeah.
because when we are not in that, and when we don't have that, and we enter, relationships where, uh we think, I like what you said too about, like, kind of like the idea of marriage as well, is like, that's also about stripping away, like, all of you and coming into, I
Mhm.
personally believe that marriage should truly be about two whole people coming
Mhm.
together, but, like, not losing each other, not
Yeah.
losing themselves into each other. And I'm just
Mhm.
speaking from my own experience, where I sought relationships, and I lost myself into people.
Mhm.
And especially in that sexual interaction, like,
Yeah.
especially when they are connected into my sacral, my womb,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
my sensual power, like, it's I feel like energetically it was the most chaotic tornado, black hurricane of trying to find my center again.
Yeah.
And I will say one more thing, and I'll wrap up my little monologue here,
No,
is
I'm here for it.
that, like, a part of one of the biggest things that helped me, um, I think it was, like, the first time I understood about codependency, and I got the book, Codependent No More.
Mhm.
And that was really helpful, because also one of my partners had, uh, extreme alcohol, substance abuse, mental health issues, and I found myself constantly being the caretaker, constantly putting my needs, desires, wants, dreams completely aside, because I was here to be this person's caretaker. I was supposed to be here to save their fucking life. again and again and again and again, hospital visit after hospital visit, trauma after trauma, and never having any time for myself.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so I think the one
Mm.
message I want to say here for someone that's listening is just like, first off, it's like baby steps of like tuning into yourself, of like,
Mhm.
what do you really want? How do you feel?
Mhm.
What do you need? And starting to just, very slowly start to prioritize that.
Mhm.
And okay, that's all I'm going to say on that.
No, I love it. I love it. Even maybe a step back further, it's not just okay for me to want something for myself, to desire something for myself. It is imperative for me to be in my fullness. It
Yeah.
is imperative. It's my job to figure that out. And I would have said I would have grown up saying that's sinful to be thinking or talking about, "Oh, what I wanna do," right? That was kind of the culture in our family even, like, you don't talk about that. You don't talk about, like, "Oh, what do you want?" That is kind of sinful, right? We wanna focus on the other person, and I do think that, in an ideal situation, if you have 2 people, like you said, who are whole, who are offering that to each other, and have an awareness of balance, right? And I think that's incredibly beautiful. When it doesn't work is when one person is, expecting. I kept waiting to run into the line that my husband wouldn't cross in terms of harm for me. Like, at what point he would go, "Oh my god. I mean, she has taken care of, like, the kids 27 nights in a row now. That's too much. Like, I need to be stepping up." I kept thinking, like, 27, 58. What's the number? Or, I think I kept expecting to run into something that would flag that awareness for him, and then the trueness of him, which was to want to offer that to me, to be caring for me in the way I cared for him, that that would um that would present itself, right? And it took me a very long time to realize that there was no boundary back here, and that he would push and push and push and push, until something happened that was intolerable for him. And that's pretty disheartening and gross, really, to realize, right, that you spent all this time being what you wanted to see back in a relationship, right? And I was actually just talking to my therapist about this. This is another thing I'd like to highlight is when you have lived this way of self-sacrifice and a form of hypervigilance, really. Hypervigilance meaning you're always paying attention to the air in the room, to the energy in the room, and is somebody distressed that needs soothing because that's safe? Or what do people need around me? Oh, I think I notice, it's part of what happens when you're a parent, right? You have a higher sensitivity toward different cries, right? Or different sounds. And you're like, oh, actually it's way too quiet in there. I need to go see what my 3-year-old's up to. But that hyper attendance to someone, right? Um, I wanted that. And I deserved that. I deserved somebody saying, "Ah, man, Jody just is worn out. Like, she is exhausted." And I have the capacity to step in and ease her suffering in this way, and I want to. And the neglect that happens when you are just emptying yourself at the service of others, it's really subtle and really painful. And unless you either come from a space where you can say things like, "I deserve," or "I want," and that's safe to say and not sinful to say, um, then it takes a while to recognize that all you're doing is just being emptied, right? And I think that the neglect is a really unique kind of betrayal pain, because we all deserve to be in relationship, whether it's romantic, whether it's a friend, whether it's family. We deserve to have a few relationships where we receive back as much care as we put into it, right? Maybe even a few relationships where it's imbalanced the other way.
Yeah.
And imagine that.
Yeah.
um, I think so. Anyway, yeah, I just kind of wanted to highlight the neglect is a layer. It's a deeper layer
Yeah.
besides the other betrayals that you can maybe articulate a little bit more clearly. And I know I've heard that resonated with my clients as well. Just like, oh, right, like I would have loved if they would have noticed me, cared for me, fed me, you know, held my hand when I was worried, gave me a hug when they could tell I was distressed so I didn't have to ask for it. I didn't have to beg for it, or I didn't have to,
Yeah.
all of that. So, yeah, that the neglect is it's a spicy part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been 7 years since my ex and I were officially done. I've been raising my son on my own.
Mm.
And 2 years ago, I had gotten in a relationship and it was like, okay, cool. Like I can tell where so much of my inner work, my therapy, my like working in women's circles, working with mentor was really getting me. And then I had like another relationship where I was like really able to see like, oh, okay, there's still some dynamics here. There's something within. And what I want to name here is I've just been in this like incubation in the past couple years. And um one of the things that I found within myself was realizing the dynamics in which I had with my family and my father, and where I was the mediator. And my coping mechanism was to be hypersensitive, hyper aware of everyone else's emotions, and so that I could navigate and morph myself to
Yeah.
exactly what was needed so that it was self preservation. It was a
Mhm.
complete survival mechanism.
Yeah.
And I recognize in which, like, this was a dynamic in which I lived through again and again, and I
Mm.
absolutely, like, don't wanna say, like, I attracted that, and it's what was familiar was for me. Like, biologically familiar is what that's what made me feel safe.
Mhm.
And until, like, I learned these things, and until, like, I started to put these pieces together, like, "Oh my god, this isn't safe.
Mhm.
There's a
Mhm.
different reality for me
Yeah.
that, like, then I was able to start building that bridge. And
Mhm.
I want to name that like sisterhood, and women have been some of the greatest supporters in holding me and supporting me and
Mm.
turning into a lot of my work today. Yeah.
That's right, and being what you needed, right?
Yeah.
Being what you need in those moments, yeah. Yeah, and I wanna say too, interestingly, when you were talking about gendered roles, so I have one brother that's older and 2 younger, and they got me through this shit show that was my divorce and custody issues that followed, and I adore them, and we have such a good time together, and they always have my back, right? If I in terms of that neglect, they will they will reach out to me and they provide that for me, right? And interestingly, all 3 of them are hyper sacrificial in their relationships.
Mm,
Um, and that I didn't expect that, but somehow we all got that. Somehow we all got that message that that was the job to be done. Um, but yeah, and I also wanted to say too that I have had, you know, this idea that relationship is sort of a destination has been reframed for me recently too. And speaking of teachers, right? I have learned so much about who I am, my kind of innate reflexive responses, and my tendency, I guess, in relationship, that it's been so helpful, right? And and I have also had so much healing in romantic relationships.
yeah.
And even the smallest thing, as there was a moment that is so clear to me where there was a guy coming over to my house that I had been in relationship on and off with for quite a while. And I had to tell him something that was really hard. And I was in a, I could not regulate my breathing before he showed up for probably 4 hours. I went for a run in the rain. I did some yoga. I splashed some cold water. I did everything I could. And I couldn't quite recognize it at the time, but I was afraid of that interaction. And I he actually appreciates the story, but he came and sat on my couch, and I kind of like sat on his lap facing him, and I was like, I need to tell you something. And I had never been afraid of this man, obviously. Um and his version of the story is, Jody, you pinned me to the couch. Like, you held my arms in place when you told me this, which I did not recognize at the time. But I do think there was something about maybe if he can't go anywhere, then I can control his response to this, right? And so I tell him this hard thing, and he says, Jody, you don't owe me that explanation. That's not, I've never asked that of you. Like, that was, you're good. And that I could feel my nervous system shifting toward healing in that moment. Like, oh, there is another way for this.
Yeah.
There is another way. I can sometimes, maybe not always, but that is a possibility, right? And the bar kind of raised for me, right?
Yeah.
I've experienced men who have been so generous with me and so thoughtful. Like, things like, I packed fucking snacks for you on the picnic we're going on. And I know you love this little chocolate. And I got, like, that just like melts me, right? That attention. And it has healed me, and it has restored kind of this baseline of what I deserve, what I will accept, what I won't tolerate. And I do think, getting back to the religious part of it, this purity culture, which is it's another podcast in and of itself, right? But the setup of the purity culture is basically shame around any sexuality, acknowledgement of your sexuality, certainly any attendance to your sexuality before you're married, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not to talk about it, not to explore it, certainly, and to be very constrained in relationship up to the point where you decide to get married, right? I dated a guy in high school for a year and a half, and we never kissed. And we hardly ever held hands, because he would feel guilty about it for days afterwards, and would come back with some scripture about, like, oh, we really can't, like, I have to remove that temptation from me, like holding hands.
Mm-hmm.
And and then I did actually kiss somebody before I got married. Don't tell my mom, but I didn't have sex before I got married. And it's part of the reason why I met and married this man in the span of a year. And that is a story I'm sure you've heard from other people. And it is so caustic, but it also fails to provide a bar. It fails to provide a baseline. It fails to provide an understanding of, how do you respond in relationship? What are these old things that you've pulled unknowingly from your childhood and are bringing to this, right? And in the absence of, like, allowing for that deep connection, before you say, I'm going to do this with you for the rest of my life, it really is a mechanism for control and for keeping, it's not always gendered, but largely, right, keeping women small, because they don't know. Like, why do men want to marry 15-year-olds? They don't fucking know. They don't know anything about themselves. And so whatever they get, that's as good as they've ever had. And I think, I'm so grateful to have become aware of that, to not raise my kids that way, because it's just so caustic. But I didn't recognize it at the time. It just felt like hard and important, and like the cost of doing it the right way, and the suffering, all the suffering in it. So I do think the experience matters, so that you get to know yourself. Because I think relationship, like I said, rather than being a destination, I think it's like a teacher, like you mentioned. It's a chance to be like, huh, who am I with this person? What is there in this relationship for me to learn about myself? How can I learn to hold on to me better in this relationship? How can I learn to hold on to the boundaries that I have now have actual name for? We're going to call this a boundary. Me saying I won't tolerate this behavior, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think rather than even looking at like, oh, that relationship failed, um, to say like, I've have such gratitude for some of the relationships I've been in. Like I've learned so much, like you were saying, right, about who I am, what work I still need to do, um, and what I want out of the whole thing, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that perspective and everything you've just shared. And but you touched on something so beautiful too about like men and in your life that like have met you and have been able to help you on this healing process. What might seem just so natural to them, this little
Mhm,
micro thing to help
mhm,
you with the healing, and in breaking a cycle or a pattern or a belief and showing like, oh my gosh, there's something else here. And um something I'm really excited about is so Divinely Sovereign is opening its doors next month, and right now I'm starting to open up like literally today I'm going to be announcing the
mhm,
Feminine Ache, a 2-day workshop that I'm going to be hosting in a couple weeks,
mhm,
and the doors to Divinely Sovereign are going to be open, and I'm working with Ian Wood, which is this awesome man that does a lot of work with men and is a thought leader on men's sexuality as
mhm,
well, and spirituality. And what's really cool is one of the things that he brought into our collaboration was we're going to be doing an in-body or in-person embodiment day workshop where men are going to come for the women to role play out certain dynamics. And so let's say it was like a father dynamic, a brother dynamic, a teacher, a husband, an ex, in the direction of retuning, getting to kind of like go into like a simulation
mhm,
of
mhm,
that dynamic and giving them an
mhm,
opportunity to like practice and being able to choose and break that pattern, a new cycle. And yeah, this is fascinating because this what I've been really tuning into and within this transformation that I've been in this season is that we're really going to go in the direction of the feminine. It's called Divinely Sovereign, Empowering the Feminine. And so we're going to be gathering women for um, this
mhm.
potent container in literally going in the direction of healing their relationship with the masculine, rooted in masculine wounding. So, more to
I
come.
love that you're doing that. I love that. And the fun thing about our nervous system is it doesn't know. It doesn't know if it's responding to something that smells like a threat from 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It doesn't know if we're simulating repair.
Yeah.
It is they get to sit in that repair, right?
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And for as much shit as I talk about fuck the patriarchy and, all of it, um I do there are so many ways that our culture, in a way that they have kept women small. I mean, all of it, in my opinion, is under the guise of don't be a woman.
Mm.
So in my opinion, you don't want to be a woman as a woman. So be small, be the certain way, go easy, be one of the guys, be fun to hang out with, don't take things too seriously, whatever. And for men, don't be a woman, right? Like that's the worst possible
Mm.
thing that a man could be like, right? And the feminine in that, right? And so I think it's so important to create spaces where men get to practice being vulnerable, like maybe without somebody pinning them, pinning them to the couch, but practice saying a vulnerable thing and hearing somebody say, "Thank you for sharing that with me. That must have
Yeah.
been really hard for you to articulate right now. I'm so grateful that you gave me the chance to hear that." Right.
Yeah.
And the more opportunity men get to not be shamed for fucking pussy,
Mm.
or like you're weak, or you're like all these names we call women that we shame men with.
Yeah.
I think it keeps them locked down and with one emotion, which is angry. That's the only emotion that we respect really in men as a culture. And it is it is perpetuating this dynamic of harm to women, right? It's they of course it's all related. Of course it's all
Yeah.
related. So
And to
thank you.
themselves. Like it benefits nobody. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right.
So we're going to be coming to a close here shortly. But before we come to a close, I wanted to really offer you this time as well to share your work. And if someone's listening, if um, they're going through a divorce or a separation or preparing, um, I'm curious if you could share what is it like to work with you? Who do you support? Anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, thank you. So my business is called Solidarity Consulting, and again, it's the name even indicates what I wished I would have had going through this, right? I wish someone would have said like, "Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about and I believe you and here's some skills to work within that." So I work with usually I use the term protective parent, or if there aren't children involved, and oftentimes there aren't, it can be horrific even without children, right?
Yeah.
Um, the person finds their way to me and is like, I think something is different about my divorce, right? I think like I think of most divorces being like a lowercase d divorce, and the all caps divorce are kind of the ones that I am most drawn to because it's what I went through, and I think there's the most healing needed in that, at least in terms of what I have to offer. But I work with people on all different aspects. So sometimes somebody comes to me and says, I think my son is in a narcissistic relationship and I don't know how to help them. I feel so helpless to call out what's happening. Like, how do I navigate that? And we work through that, right? Um, or I have a colleague or my boss, or a family member. And I don't know how to make sense of what I'm seeing. How do I hold myself in this space? But largely it's people either either coming to me being like, I listened to a podcast and some of those same things are ringing true to me about my marriage. And I'm wondering if maybe if that's the name for what has been going on. And so sometimes ideally, actually, I get to work with somebody before they've poked the bear, right? Before that raccoon is really, really feisty in the corner, because there's a lot of planning that can be done ahead of time. And not just the emotional work, which I really am drawn to doing, um, but the logistic work, right? What do you need? What kind of things, documents do you need to have gathered before you go? This is the case in any divorce, but the secrecy matters even more in these abusive situations. Um, how are you going to talk to your kids about this? What's the plan for the language around these things that they're going to be witnessing? How are you going to talk to your kids about what they're experiencing firsthand when they're not with you? Um, how do we get your thoughts organized, and your story kind of clear so that when you go pay thousands of dollars to meet with your attorney, you can speak in complete sentences, right? Because when we are dysregulated, like I know I did this to my attorney. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just like, I came in like with a paper bag full of all these documents spun out everywhere. And um and um I had no idea. Like it is straight up survival mode. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the work I do is also recognizing the limitations of family court, understanding that it is a patriarchal system, that the there is going to be high attention to your behavior. And if you are reacting in a very appropriate manner to somebody abusing you, that will very likely be called out as the problem. And so I work with clients on, okay, you have a court date. What are you going to wear? What kind of grounding work are you going to be doing on the day before leading up to it? What is there a ring that you need to wear that's going to remind you that you're okay and that you're in this very moment? Is there a special cup you have? Is there a sticky note you need to put somewhere to remind yourself? And how do we like work out the betrayal and very real um, emotions of dealing with this type of process. How do we work that out together so that when you show up in court and a judge has 20 minutes to make a decision on who's the problem, that you can at least bring your very best game to that and kind of neutralize the playing field a little bit because it is not an even playing field. And when pathology driven sociopaths can sit in a courtroom and just be relaxed and calm and you're over there pissed or anxious or inarticulate, you are the problem, right? So I do work with around that. I do work with how do we do a parenting plan that is actually going to be a little more airtight so that people that want to find a problem in everything will. How do we work on that? Um, and communication back and forth to your ex. How do you minimize the fun for them with, the way they delight in you panicking and blowing up? How do we minimize what they get to see about that? How do you find some little baby steps toward agency and some little boundaries that you might be able to throw down so you can kind of begin on this path back to the fullness of you? So that's what I largely do.
Holy shit, Jody. Oh my God. Like, I'm like tearing up inside because I'm like, I wish I had you 7 years
No, I
ago.
wish I had me. We all
Yeah.
we all deserve somebody like that, right? We all
Yeah.
deserve that. Yeah.
Oh my God. You do such powerful work. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
me. Yeah. My pleasure.
So, for people who are feeling supported by this conversation and want guidance navigating abusive relationships, high conflict divorce, where can they find your work?
You can find my website is solidarityconsulting.com. My Instagram, I try to post a fair amount on there, is Jody in Solidarity. And I have a few podcasts that I think we'll post in here. The most recent one is one that I did on narcissist apocalypse, which is if you're struggling with this, you definitely want to know about that podcast. Around more in depth around complex PTSD, memory, trauma, the nervous system, that sort of thing. So I think that will be in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Yep.
And then if you want to come to one of my events, oh yeah, right in the back, women's, that's what she said, women's storytelling. Those will be available on that. You'll see that on Instagram when that's coming up. Next one is May 15th. So if you want to tell a story or if you want to come be a listener, we'd love to have you there too.
Also, Jody has the best charcuterie boards you have ever seen in your entire life.
Truth.
Full
That's
table of just the most beautiful, decadent, like, snacks. Oh my gosh. Come
yeah,
hungry is what I'm saying. I ate dinner
come
last
hungry.
time and I fully regretted it.
Oh yes, I should actually put that on there. That's a really good point. Come hungry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had so many leftovers. I came home with, like, multiple Chinese boxes of
Yep. Yep. So good.
My son loved it. He appreciated it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Jody. And a final message. If there's someone listening right now that's feeling trapped or alone in a relationship like this or a dynamic, what would you want them to hear today?
I would say, you already know. And so, oh, I always get teary. Listen, get away, go for a walk, listen to your body. It's all in there. Everything, all the truths that you need to know, it's already there. You don't need someone else to tell you you're in a shitty marriage. You know. You don't need to tell someone else you're being disrespected. You don't need to hear that. You know it. So trust that. Practice trusting it. Practice noticing. Practice trusting it. And then get your team around you and go from there. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Jody. This has
Yeah.
been such a powerful, powerful conversation, and I know so many are going to find so much value. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for turning that into not only like your pain into your purpose, into your power, and into serving and supporting others. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on here.